highlights, he's prepared.
Mm.
So his opening lap, you know, and I love the guy that was doing the timing. Like, that guy was fired up. I love that. I love that he's got a crew that is like stoked for him. You know, they're not envious, they're stoked. That's awesome that he's got that kind of a crew.
It's one thing I really noticed was for the run especially. I think when we'll get onto the squat, there was people clearly behind the camera, but for the run, it was clear that there was a pacer for the first 3 laps. Someone else jumped in for the last one, and his coach with the clock was fired up. So yeah, and that pacing was really important. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. As a pacer, it helps in the sense that you're following somebody, but the problem is that you have no idea whether or not that person is actually going to go out a little bit hot because they're excited. And a constant speeding up and slowing down is a horrific thing for a person that's trying to settle. So a lot of people think, oh, you know what, the best way to do a half marathon row is I'm going to row hard for 1 minute, and then I'm going to row easy for 2 minutes, and then hard again. There's no settling with that. You've got to settle into a reliable and predictable pattern. And I'm talking about your movement pattern, right? Your gait, but I'm also talking about your breathing pattern. You need to settle. And that's what you see right away, is that he settles into a very comfortable rhythm in that first lap. And that's a hard thing to do, especially for a CrossFitter, because CrossFitters love going out hot. And he didn't do that. He didn't. He was controlled.
Yeah. I've not looked at his individual lap splits, but I got the impression it was pretty bang on for each one. So, like I say, he settled into that kind of that rhythm. And with regards to the kind of pacing, I've heard people tell me as well, like, if you don't train a gear, like as in like an intensity, you don't have it. And then there's putting the kind of the modality on top of that. So
right. So his pacing. So we could talk about pacing. So in a mile, you've got these 4 laps, and part of it is that the first thing everybody must do when they run a mile for time is recognize that, you know, first of all, the first lap is 409 meters. And then you have 400 and 400 and 400. So it's 1,609 meters. The key is that in every workout, there is a mental and emotional sticking point, and you have to be prepared for that. And for most people, it's that third lap that you have to recognize that that's going to be the challenge. But if you can get through that sticking point, you're close enough to the finish line where you can bring it home. And so a lot of people in those sticking points, those mental, and I'm not talking about a physical sticking point, but in this case, it would be physical as well. But in a CrossFit workout, you could have a physical sticking point at the very start. For example, if they gave me a workout that had 10 rounds and the second round was thrusters, there's my physical sticking point. But in a 10-round workout, I'll hit a mental and emotional sticking point at around 8 rounds. And so you have to be prepared for that. And that's what I was looking for, is he going to drop off in that third lap like everybody else does? And he really didn't. So his opening lap, his 400 meters was 73 seconds. So he crosses through in the 409 meters in 75 seconds. So that 75 is right on pace. Like he's right there. And so what was interesting for me is he then immediately stays and settles at that speed. His second lap, another 75. So he comes through and hits that one in 75 seconds, which was really like the way it should be done. He found his rhythm, which tells you that he's prepared. Now going into the third lap, this was really the key. Was he going to fall off? Because this is a big kid. And it's the fact is that he's got, in my opinion, and I don't know, I've never worked with him ever, but I've worked with Alex Smith. I've been to Krypton and done seminars. I've worked with Ben Smith. Alex Smith and Adam were on the same team last year, and they won the sprint as a team. And this guy's body type, I got to assume that he is a better anaerobic athlete than he is aerobic athlete. And that's why I was a little surprised. I was expecting to see some drop off and then a dramatic move in the final 200 meters, essentially using his speed reserve to bring it home. And what we saw in the third lap is he went to a 76-second lap, which is incredible that he goes 75, 75, 76. That is legit. This guy is for real. And if you're not intimidated by that, then you don't know what you're watching. That is so solid. I rarely ever see that from a CrossFit athlete. I would have expected to see 80 seconds in that lap from him. And we didn't see it. So now what happens is we go into that fourth lap, and let's face it, he comes through and finishes that third lap. He already knows he has it. He's home free. We all know it. When I ran 5 years ago a 4:57 mile, and I knew right away on that third lap that you got it. You just know, because you know that you're in the groove. You know that you're just hovering in that maximum sustainable intensity. And you know that you've got a little bit of kick to the finish, and you can bring it home, because as soon as you cross the line, you can lay on the ground. And that pull is strong. So him in his last lap, I looked at it, and he does the last lap in 72 seconds. But that's not the coolest part. I mean, to me, that was expected that he was going to go 4 seconds faster just based upon his body type, right? But it's his splits. So he crosses through the third lap, and his next 200 meters, he does it in exactly 36 seconds. 36 seconds. He then finishes the next one in exactly 36 seconds. So what it tells you is, when did he decide to make the move in accelerating to bring it home? He decided right when he crossed that third lap, and he finishes the third lap. Imagine the confidence that he has, and he says, I'm going to hit the afterburners now with a full lap to go. That's never happened, ever. Most people will make a move with 150 to go. But he was so comfortable that he actually went that move at the end of the third lap, which tells you that he has more speed available to him. This was a sure thing. This was not his challenge.
And oh, amazing. And to get that insight from you into to break that down is really interesting. And I've seen Adam give a couple of interviews, and he's really, really humble in kind of acknowledging what he's been able to achieve there with the squat as well. But and he goes on to say he's expecting others to do it now. Others will come with over 500-pound squat and maybe even quicker miles. But it's really interesting to hear you say that he's got more in the tank as well. Whether he'll look to do it, or whether he'll kind of step back from that kind of, because it's a big commitment to kind of put that in. I get the impression he's been focused on it for a good kind of 6 to 10 weeks, but obviously there's years and years of capacity behind him as the elite level athlete that he is.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is that if you look at his capacity, so, the mile, like we said, is 80% aerobic. You can back into, there's plenty of formulas that take a mile time and it predicts your VO2 max. And so you could take a guy, and I don't know what his weight is, but, say it's 215 pounds, a guy of his size at 215 pounds, he's got a VO2 of 60 milliliters per kilogram per minute. 61. That is a massive number. It's a massive number because of the weight. So in running, you've got to move your mass. So weight matters. Like for a 6-foot male, the target weight for a middle distance runner, like the ideal weight, and that's also a known, is somewhere around 155 pounds. So, and the reason is because that weight, like he's carrying 60 extra pounds, which is hurting his overall performance. Meaning if he dropped, and I'm not saying that's anything, but just to get perspective here on how great this achievement is, because the runners out there, the specialists that sit there and go, 5-minute mile is a joke. Yeah, the guy's 215 pounds. He's got a VO2 of 61 at that weight. Now, if he goes down to a target weight, an ideal target weight for a middle distance runner of 155, do you know what happens to his VO2? His VO2 jumps to 84, 85 milliliters per kilogram per minute. Now, there are not many elite distance runners in the world today that have a number that is that high. And that's a fact. If he drops the weight, because you divide it by the weight, meaning if he gets a VO2 max test today, they're going to say, how much do you weigh? And he's going to say 215. They're going to take his performance in that run VO2 test, and they're going to divide it by that weight. If he turns around and says it's 155, it will not say 61 milliliters per kilogram per minute. It will say 84, 85. That is world class. Now, remember what I said is that you could take his 456 mile and back into a formula, and here's his estimated VO2, which is a 61. The same thing. Now, if you have an 84 to 85 VO2, you can back into his target mile time. And you know what it is? 406. Now we're talking runners. This guy's for real. He is a legitimate talent. He just chooses not to focus on the movement of running.
That's really interesting. And I think what you've definitely done for me is kind of coming from the CrossFit side is kind of help me get my head around it in a quantified way, but equally for anyone who's interested in it from the running side, actually can start to kind of put it into numbers that make sense to them as well. And that the fact that you bring in the weight there is huge. So thank you.
Yeah, well, so let's talk about, so everybody wants relative. So let's talk about Rich Froning. So we're talking about VO2. Rich Froning. So Adam is 6 feet, Rich Froning is 5'9". Adam is 215, Rich Froning is 198. Adam's current VO2 in running estimated is 61. Rich Froning's, when he was really in his best running condition, his VO2 in the movement of running was 76. At 198 pounds. So if Rich Froning gets down to his ideal weight, which would be about 140, he is well under a 4-minute mile. That's the level of talent that these guys have. Now, there's all other bunch of variables that go into obviously hitting that type of target time, but he has the potential based upon the VO2. The question really will be is what percentage utilization, meaning his lactate threshold relative to that VO2, because VO2 is not a sustainable speed. So it's you know, what percentage can he sustain for 4 minutes? And that would be the question mark. So when you take an athlete like a Rich Froning would have beaten Adam at a pound per pound mile. That's how good Rich. That's how good Rich is.
That's really interesting, because I think often the comparison is done on the kind of CrossFit benchmarks, you know, whether it be Fran or Grace or something longer like Murph. It's really interesting to hear it kind of compared with the calculated kind of mile times, because it brings it out of the kind of constantly varied and talks about a single modality and kind of like that ranking. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, but what Adam did, you have to, any runner that would look at, and if he has the potential of getting to an 84 VO2 is intimidating, because now you have to remember that VO2, it's not a sustainable speed, right? That if you get a VO2 max test, within 30 seconds after hitting your VO2 max, you're laying on the ground. So you have to slow down some percentage. And, you know, a good athlete would slow down 10%, and that's their sustainable intensity. You know, great athletes can slow down, you know, 9 or 8 or even 7%. Julie Fouché in CrossFit style movements would slow down 5%. I mean, she was one of the greatest athletes to ever get tested in our sport. But the question would be is that, you know, what is the percentage utilization of that VO2 that you can maintain? And what Adam demonstrated was an incredible ability to maintain a very high percentage of that. Yeah, he's a massive intimidating factor. And if someone doesn't respect it, then they don't know what they're looking at. This guy's for real.
Awesome. And I hope what you've kind of shared with us there kind of helps those that if they didn't understand it, they understand it more now and should increase the respect for Adam's achievement even further. And anyone else that then kind of follows suit, you know, so he says like, oh, I was the first, but I won't be the last. And so just that level.
Well, the other thing too, though, is that I would look at, you know, like what's the guy wearing and what is his technique like? And he really, his technique, there's, he shouldn't be able to run that fast with that kind of technique. It's riddled with problems. You know, he's got overstride, he's got a massive heel strike. He is running with power the entire time. There's no efficiency in there. I mean, it's strength that's moving him through, which is remarkable that he can force that kind of speed for that amount of time. And the other thing is like, what he was wearing, you know, he was just wearing shorts, but his shoes and his choice of shoes, like the shoes were good for him in the sense that, you know, the Saucony shoe that he had, the guy that designed it used to be at Reebok, and we did the Harmony Road running shoe together. And this shoe, it's a good shoe. It's a $200 shoe, but it's not super lightweight. It's, you know, 7.5 ounces, which is, you know, not super light. It's got a big heel, so there's a sizable heel drop. It's not a racing flat. But for him, because of the way in which he foot strikes, with an overstride in that heel strike, he is getting an amazing amount of transfer because this shoe has a carbon fiber plate in it. And so when you load that plate, it will get a stretch, like rebounding effect. And that helps him. Because if you heel strike, you don't have any of that free kinetic energy. So if people are listening, what I'm talking about is just do a few jump ropes, you know, and when you jump with the jump rope, you land on the ball of your foot, your midfoot, and you feel a stretch reflex. You load your calf and Achilles tendon with this kinetic energy, and it just bounces you up. In the middle of while jumping rope, start jumping from your heel, and you'll notice that there is no stretch reflex. And so Adam is limiting his performance by having the technique that he has. He would be much faster taking advantage of that free kinetic energy. And so I look at like the shoe, 7.5 ounces. Where's the track spike? Right? Like get the weight down sub 4 ounces and have a zero drop shoe. I mean, there's so much more speed there. That's why I'm saying this guy can run sub 450. This was a breeze for him. It was a breeze. That dramatic land on the grass, that was all show. This guy could have walked off and yeah. I don't think it was that tiring for him. He's legit.
Oh, amazing.